There is one game we all play, and that game is called real life. Not everyone is good at it, but some of us are. Real life is an open world game with endless possibilities. And after all, only the uncultured spend their day-to-day life in just one country. So join me in my life of leisure as I explore the best games for the handheld around the world. The Nintendo Game Boy is one of the most iconic pieces of gaming hardware in history. The system was released worldwide throughout 1989 and 1990. The Game Boy is Nintendo's second handheld system following the Game & Watch series, introduced in 1980, and it combined features from both the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Game & Watch. The Game Boy delivered you a high-quality gaming experience to the palms of your hands. It delivered a similar experience to that of the NES, however this time on the go. The Game Boy competed with the Sega Game Gear, Atari Lynx and the Turbo Express. The Game Boy offered a monochromatic screen, whereas its competitors all offered full-colour graphics. However, the Game Boy completely squashed all its competition by offering much better battery life and a disgustingly good library of games. The Game Boy's initial gaming momentum started with its portable version of the highly addictive puzzle game Tetris, in which charmed all ages, and that very same year saw the release of a brand new exclusive Mario game on the platform, Super Mario Land, which also went on to spawn two very successful sequels. Another massive hitter on the system was The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, which was another system exclusive, which was arguably as good as its SNES counterpart, A Link to the Past. This game was one of the many reasons to own the system. After many years of success, the system eventually started to dwindle. But in the Nintendo 64 era, the system had an Indian summer with the release of Pokemon Red, Blue and Yellow, which wasn't released until 1999 in Europe. Despite having 3D polygon graphics on our home consoles, the simple monochrome Game Boy was still king of the handhelds entering into a new millennium. What a legendary system the Game Boy is! And with a track record like that, who could argue with its legacy? We all like to go back and play the NES, the Mega Drive, the PlayStation, etc. But could we go back and play the Game Boy and enjoy it the same way on the original hardware as those other systems? Well, let's go back and take a look. For any millennials watching today, aka children, the Game Boy ran off 4 AA batteries, which surprisingly lasted quite a long time. There is a contrast dial located on the left side of the system so you can get the best visibility when playing, since the system featured no backlight. You need to play this system in as bright conditions as possible, so a sunny beach like this is the perfect condition. The only real thing I can nitpick at it for is when the game scroll fast, the screen blurs a bit. But apart from that, I am getting better outside use of it than I do on my 3DS. You may think I am stretching the truth a bit, but I am really not. Have a go at playing a game in direct sunlight on the 3DS and you will see what I mean. When playing modern 3DS games on the beach, I find myself chucking a towel over my head to darken the conditions to see the screen. It makes me look like a bloody Arab woman. Ridiculous. So, after my discovery that Game Boy games look better in the direct sunlight than its 3DS counterparts, it was now time to work out whether it was the Game Boy games that looked better or the Game Boy hardware itself. I tested my cartridge copy of Balloon Kid on my Game Boy, then had a go at exactly the same game which was digitally downloaded onto my 3DS. The result was that the game looked even better on the modern tech. So now I know, for future reference, when I'm out and about, to always go for the old school games instead, because the visibility on them is far superior to that of the modern 3DS games. It is a cold, hard fact that in dark environments, the original Game Boy doesn't fare too well. But fortunately in the modern world, we have plenty of alternative ways in which we can enjoy these fantastic classics. Firstly, we have the Super Game Boy, which was an add-on for the Super Nintendo that allowed you to play your Game Boy on a television. This was fantastic back in the day. As I have said before on my show, the SNES didn't fare too well in the UK, but luckily I had one. In the Nintendo 64 era, I was the envy of all my friends when I was playing my copy of Pokemon Blue on the big screen. None of my friends owned a Super Nintendo. I really do not get how most people put up with playing Game Boy inside. I don't think I could have coped. Next we have the Gameboy Advance Sp. This thing was revolutionary when it came out. We got a backlight so we could play games anywhere, and we got a charger so we didn't need to buy those pesky AA batteries anymore. 2003 was a special year of portable gaming for me because of this thing. This little system is great as it plays Game Boy, Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games. This is the ultimate form in cartridge-based Game Boy gaming. In the 90s, the SNES had the Super Game Boy, and in the noughties, the GameCube had the Game Boy Player. This is the best way to play Game Boy cards at home in my opinion. With this beauty, you can play Game Boy, Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games on a television. Recently, I played through the fan translation of Mother 3 on one of these things through a CRT TV, and it delivered an Earthbound-like experience. A fantastic piece of kit. The best official way to play original Game Boy games on the go in the modern era is to download them on the new Nintendo 3DS. They are very cheap in the Nintendo eShop. The screens on these things are about 4 times the size of that of the original Game Boy, and twice as bright as that of the Game Boy Advance Sp. It's great that Nintendo still supports us in playing most of these classics. Last but not least, and my new favourite way of playing Game Boy games, this is the JXD Android gaming tablet. I have downloaded an app on this thing to emulate all of my favourite games in my collection. Just look at the size and brightness of this thing's screen. Nothing matches it. Here is the system next to the other handheld models I have mentioned. So, there you go. Some great ways in which you can enjoy the original Game Boy games. And you don't even have to look like a bloody dirty hipster in the process, carrying around one of these bloody bricks. Speaking of hipsters, and I'm not being ironic when I say this, but the simple monochrome screens on these Game Boys fare much better than that of its modern 3DS counterpart. This surprised even me, to be honest, as I produced this video. But if you spend most of your time on a beach like myself, you'll be much better off playing Pokemon Red and Blue than you would playing Pokemon Sun and Moon in the future. The Game Boy's fantastic legacy lives on. Cheerio! Hello, if you're new to my channel, then please hit the subscribe button. I will soon be uploading some more videos of handhelds around the world. Until then, why don't you click one of the annotations and watch one of my more recent reviews? Yeah!